Hi all, Randi Green here. It is November 10th, 2024. And for those of you who listen to this years ahead, you won't find the information. But for those of you who are here with me now, what is left to be said in terms of what is going on the extreme west and extreme east, where Europe now has become the middle point of the new reality configuration of our planet. You can find on Twitter, the Whole Academy Twitter account. I don't know if I'm going to leave it there or remove it later on, whatever, but there's still information to be gained in terms of political updates that are easy accessible. So I have kind of made a little bit of following of more or less the European institutions, because my focus is now moving towards that one timeline that we have got left. In the webinar on December 7th, I'm going to talk about the two main timelines that are left. And since we now know one is going revertly into the past, let's just put it that way, because I don't want to give it more energy than it truly deserves. And I kind of concluded that, and I don't want to give it more energy. Because in no reality, I can endorse whatever's going on there. So that's me closing the door and saying, and segregating myself and saying, enough of that, the low participation. It is now time to point that towards what's left of the path out, and how we can, if well succeeded, build future civilization that will arise after 2135. If not, then the passage out. And for that, we need a timeline that is connected to the 1-7 pillar. The 2-8 pillar is now situated completely, utterly in the States. So whatever that means and whatever that is and whatever's going to unfold, the next 4 years will show us whether it's just 4 years or it will continue. That's how it goes with all activation and cleanup of pillars. If it is so that it will continue, then it will be segregated from our reality field. And by that, we should not cling on to it or keep our attention feeding whatever kind of programs that are going on. So that's the first difficult step, not being drawn there, because there are many magnetic forces that want us to pay attention, as it has been since the 1950s. Going from the extremes of blowing up nuclear bombs to whatever it is that they are doing over there, to terraform and opening up what is needed to be opened up, so that whoever's coming in for the 8th dimension now has an entire continent to get access to. And that includes Canada and South America. Okay, so with that said, we'll just leave it there. Atlantis fell. The new Atlantis will go its path as it's supposed to, due to the law of the cycles. And we will look at with kindness and appreciation that a portion of humanity are taking that path so that we don't have to. That's the best way I can put it, because here it's important to use the method of turning the other cheek and just be kind, and just remember that whatever choice these people made, they were not in their full wits. You have heard that before. And no, I'm not playing a certain figure here, but it is a good saying, and it is important to understand that when we're dealing with these forces that are now in play in USA and are taking over, they are very strong on the opposite polarity of the spectrum of progression versus inversion. Okay, so that's a very, very, very explicit way of putting it. So with that said, for me, as going back in time and figuring out what's important for me to focus on, where to give my energy, we will do as we did the last time with the 2-8 pillar, and that's technically what the astral barrier was about. Not that was a good invention, because it made it too easy to let me put it this way, the foundational technology that became the astral barrier, let me be explicit here, to build the barrier of the 2-8 pillar, aka the main pillar that are fueling the timelines and reality fields that were hit hard after the timeline event, to create a blockage. that's the 2-8 pillar. And we created technology to create a barrier there, and that barrier became the astral barrier. So with that one said, we also understand that the original foundation of that barrier was to keep a light quotient, a barrier between what had gone inverted into what could still progress, and uphold it by the understanding of the technique of turning the other cheek, because we knew what was behind, but we were not giving it energy, we were not participating, we were not going through the gate systems, we would not do any openings, we would not do any forms of thought forms, sciences, or anything except from a little handful of a specialized unit that were able to deal with this type of inversion of consciousness units. Most of these are lost and are now part of the 2-8 pillar they were trying to figure out ways to undo the effects of. So with that said, we are now reverting back to that and say that's what's playing out over there. And as one of the ones that actually was part of that unit, I am here by saying, well, I've done my part now. The last 10 years, I have released as much as I could of the ones that got stuck in this project and got lost on the timelines. Whoever wanted to leave have had the opportunity now. And now we close the doors because now an active force is coming in. And that means it's no longer a dormant timeline that can be activated, where a catalyst can go in and assist whoever needs to be released so they are not stuck there. And are in that way, I have kept my word to the ones that got lost there, the ones that were part of my project, and I have released them and they are out. And by that, my job on that pillar is done. So the next level is the 1-7 pillar. The version of it that we sense into as the first level is attached to the artificial fourth dimension and goes from Mercury to Arcturus, and that's part of now the parallel universal matrix. So the 1-7 pillar in itself, that's the age of Aquarius, just so you get that completely clear. That's the 11-11 configuration. That's the 1-7 pillar. And that one is now Android. So that means it's technologically driven. And as I said, we begin with the 5th cycle, understanding technology in the right ways and in the right forms, how the original technologies was connected to consciousness units and how it was used in the proper manner to lead to progression as a tool, as something that were assisting the overall construction in this, creating specific environments, specific type of fields that would allow for consciousness potentials to easierly transform energy units. So that means that technology is there to create an environment that makes it more easier and more conducive for us to do a progression work. And that's all it's used for. It cannot be used for doing the progression work. It cannot be used for amplifying our local fields so that we individually can become more or whatever. Technology is always used to create an easier access point, so to speak, a connection point, a kind of rod, a kind of seeding, a kind of anchor from where specific types of energies can become easily accessible. And that goes both ways. So that's important to understand that technology is there to assist us in transformational processes. And that can go both ways, towards regression or towards progression. Okay, so that's the first step we have to learn when we go to the 1-7 pillar. The next step that we are to learn is that was the pillar that the councils used when they could see that our solar system were degrading to a degree where it was no longer possible to uphold it by the consciousness units alone. And that's one of the reasons why they decided to collaborate with the D10 Collective, which was a bad decision. But they thought it was a good decision because the D10 Collective appeared, as they always do, they have this mechanism of dazzling. They appeared as if they were actually going to help us, and they appeared with the rhetoric as if they were actually going to support the continuation of our existence. And I see the same rhetoric being played out around the world from the groups that are now coming in and have a completely different agenda. Anyways, words are cheap, we know that. So with that understood, we also understand that to get on the positive timeline, it goes through the 1-7 pillar. And that's where inner earth come in. I have things in my head I'm not revealing yet because it could be distortion. So I'm doing a lot of research right now, so get that one. I will create a booklet as always, so I get the history, the foundation, what it used to be, what others have seen, whatever, in a booklet, and then I can work from there and jump to the next layer, the higher level. Always remember the opposition forces. You need to create an opposition, an anchor point from where you can create the opposition of it, and then you can elevate it up to a higher, the Trinity structure. Always remember the Trinity structure inside this reality. It's a foundational principle of the 3-9 pillar. With that said, then it's the patterns of change that need to come in play, and that's up to us to begin to create these patterns of change. We will be supported by the Andromedan energies of the core as it is right now. And no, inner earth is not technically close to the core because the core is in a higher dimension, even though it's difficult to understand. Similar, the core of the sun is in a higher dimension and the core of Jupiter is in a higher dimension. That's the Trinity cores of our solar system that runs on 3 different types of aspects of reality. And that's the 4th, 5th, and 6th dimension. Earth is supposed to rise into the 5th. We were supposed to become the 5th planet. We are now situated in the 3rd, which is unfortunate. When the first 5th planet didn't make it through the technological era, it blew up, and whatever is left is the asteroid belt. We now understand that that's where our civilization is supposed to go. And then what is left of the inner planets of our solar system was supposed to collapse upon itself, be drawn into the core of the sun and dissipate and cease to exist, as we are seeing all comets and whatever that gets into the trajectory of the sun are being pulled into the sun where it evaporates, or pulled into our atmosphere where it evaporates. So that's part of some of the dynamics that we will see in the future. And easy now, calm now. No need to get all hyped up about whatever will happen in the sky or not in the sky, and whatever will go and whatever, and all of these kind of things. There are plenty of that out there on the internet already. And this is where we're being very mindful of our thought forms and our emotions, and make sure that the balance point is reached. Whenever you flip to one of the sides, reach the balance point, because that is the path to go forward with. If you go into one of the extremes, you will go into the polarity game. And until you know how that one works, stay with the opposition, transform, and learn how to be centered in the middle. And that's the transition sciences where I talk about this, including the way that we can arrange our lives. And that's some of the next step. But back to the 1-7 pillar. So the understanding is right now that what was left of that civilization that used to administer that before the councils completely fell, decided to create an alternate reality that we understand as inner earth. That alternate reality is difficult to get to. And whenever I think about it, I see all of these weird movies in my head, and I got all of this distortion, and none of it is what it is. I know that's just what pops up naturally because my mind is searching through the layers of reality to get to what it actually is. So that's the cleansing process through the programs, the deception, the collective thought forms, whatever's there. Whatever we look at something, always remember the first thing you'll get, collective thought forms, get rid of that. The next things you will get is probably astral glamour inserted by the Brotherhood's false information, get rid of that. Then you get to the artificial 4th dimension, their interception programs, get rid of that. And then you can begin to see, okay, what's actually here? What is it that I'm actually remote viewing and investigating? Okay, so with that one said, then once I've done with that and created that little booklet, the next step will be the communities that we are to focus on the future timeline, and how we can support some of the projects on that future timeline that will be part of the center point of our global community. And that's the best way I can put it, with 2 extremes on one side. And the technologies that will be needed for that might or might not come later on. And unfortunate right now, as I can see it, since Europe, the different countries in Europe, there will be people in countries in Europe that will say no thank you. But the majority of the northern part of Europe are still open-minded towards that being human can have many different expressions. Let me put it this way. And with that, there is a window that I hope that the European leaders will not take, and that's the one that technically would link us up to the parallel universal matrix, due to their hybrid projects, which they might choose to allocate from the States and towards Europe. And to put it this way, I do not see that as a fortunate outcome, but that is the one that is controlling the 1-7 pillar. So I suspect that the Andromedans might play around with that idea, that could be a solution, including Inner Earth are also playing around with that idea. But we also know that the parallel universal matrix are only here as long as they see it is within their favor. And that means that once they pull out, they extract more than they actually give. And that means the exchange rate is uneven. And that means that we will lose more than we will gain by having them here. We will see how the parallel universal matrix races are, what they choose to do in the years to come, because they have decisions that must be made, as well as whether or not it is their time to pull out, or if they want to remain. Most of their hybrid projects are now around the age of 25 and older. There are some of the new children, but it's not difficult. As long as you're a preteen, then it's easier to do a transition of the energy system without any big implications, and the child will continue to live happily inside this reality and grow up and be a full-born human being that will contribute to the world to the best way that person sees fit. So that's what the parallels are. I just call them that, the POMs are considering right now. So there's a lot of consideration going on, which we see both inside the base program and outside the base program. In that period before anyone has decided, you are probably in the same process of, okay, what's the next step, what to do, where should you position yourself, where should you live, what are the opportunities for us that exist inside this world. And I'm in the same process. I'm not going out with saying, oh, I got a plan, I'm going to roll it out, because my plan as always depends on what the opposition is doing, and is always depending on what the polarity is doing. And that's the laws that once you get up to the 4th, 5th, and 6th dimension, you will understand that you are under the same laws. So the higher up you get in dimensional energy, the less wiggle room you have for quote unquote free will, the more you are under the principles and the rules and the laws, at least if you join what we call the progressive races. If you are amongst the rogue races, they don't care much about the principles of the rules or the laws, because they're using technology, and some of them are so inverted it doesn't matter anymore, and onward and so forth. It's like playing with races that have got nothing to lose. And with that understanding, then you also understand why they're just saying, who cares? For them, the reciprocity and the laws of existence no longer really applies, which you know. So let us just do the segregation and say, now at least we know that. The councils have done what they can to ensure the passage out for the ones that got caught in the crossfire of the older programs. Let me put it that way diplomatically, because I'm speaking diplomatically here to keep the balanced energy. And now you begin to understand the rhetorics of balance here, because I'm exemplifying it for you as well. There's so much that I want to say that's the subtext, but I'm not, because I'm cautious about the low participation and the strength that the voice and has as an energy emitter. And that's super important, because the different vortices we have in our body are running on vibration, and what comes out of our mouth is part of that vibration. It's a tone, it's a sound, and it makes waves around us that impacts our field, and it impacts our entire constitution, and that is more important than ever. So the middle path here is that our thoughts, our emotions, our voices should be, to the best of our abilities, in the middle or the center point. if provocation happens, then we can slide into principle 2, where we will do what is necessary to create the segregation, but then it should also be balanced out right away and get back into the balance point. And that's, for those of you who remember my older material, we are allowed to be angry. I'm not saying we're going to be all bodhisattva monks that are sitting in kindness and nodding with a smile on our lips to everything that comes our way. We should choose that as an everyday occurrence, but when the situation arises, we should choose the energy that is appropriate for the situation. Again, that demands the understanding of how to transform energy. So with that, we understand that if not before, we were in the process of learning how to administer our fields, we are now in an even more challenging process of administering our fields. And that's crucial when we talk about the other timeline. And this is, again, what we call background information for the webinar, so that once we reach December 7th, then I know that most of the newcomers, they will have settled. So I already got their game plan, but as always, when the new factions come in, they always play the drums a little bit louder than necessary is possible. So they have definitely played the very high, loud drumming. We are here, this is what we're doing. So I got that, but I'm not interested in sharing that because that's a vibration I don't want to put over my tongue. And then there is the Andromedan councils and the inner earth, and what's left of the planetary hierarchy, aka Shambhala. So that's the trinity that is now in play to figure out with whatever's left. Shambhala, or the planetary hierarchy, is what's left of the different groups that decided to collaborate with the extraterrestrial colonial forces that came here and played by the tune of how to at the same time continue a sort of quote-unquote progression via the different spiritual teaching systems, but also have literally not really done what they were supposed to. So they don't have much power in what's going on. But this is, again, when we're talking about the situation of solar system that is resetting, as our system is in the process of, then chances must be given to everybody to the last point, the last consciousness unit they have. And once they deflect from that and turn away from that, then no more chances can be given. And this is very important. That's why we keep extend and try to reach out and say, come on, you still have got viable consciousness units. You can still do it. You have one viable left. Please use it. And that's where most of the ones I released, they had 1, 2, or 3 consciousness units left. And once they reach that point, the only access or the leaving is through a little orb of energy that was composed of the original version of themselves with whatever was left of the original consciousness units. And that has been pulled out. And of course, that also makes the grids fall even further. But that's the process that ignites and will ignite the resetting of our solar system. So it all runs according to plan. But again, the Andromedans are still fueling, but they are fueling, as you know, from the 9th dimension. And that means those of us who are part of the 3-9 pillar, that's the center pillar, because you have the 1, 2, 2, 8, 3, 9, and then you have the 4, 10, 5, 6, 4, 10, 5, 11, and 6, 12. So even though that it is what we say number 3 can go both ways, and that's the the crucial time that we are in when we cleanse from 2017 until now, when we have cleansed the 3-9 pillar, which is done now. Then that was the possibility we had to shift towards the progressive worlds, where humanity unfortunately chose the already played out timeline, and they didn't know better. They were just as it said within the esoterics, the past the path of least resistance. And they just did what they normally did, what they've done so many times before, and this time was the last time they chose to do so. And with that, they have now no longer what we call viable consciousness units, the ones that chose. They have chosen now whatever's there will be extinguished, because they have now, because of where we are now, the completion cycle, made their choice to be on the timeline that they are on now. So now down to 2 timelines. Okay, so those of us who still have what we call a large amount of viable units in our holographic energy system, we are, of course, beginning to ponder upon, okay, how are we going to continue our existence on the second timeline, where we will build what either can lead to the future civilizations in the solar system, or will at least get us to the exit gates, so that when this body no longer exists, we can traverse through these gates and get to platforms that will then assist us in the last portions of calibration. And these will not in any ways or forms be influenced by what's going on in the polarity, because the polarity is now so polarized that it can no longer interfere. That's only in the opposition that is possible. So that's the only plus side about the 5th dimension, is that there you can literally take the sword and cut and divide. So that's the 5th dimension, and that's what's happening now, the division that is happening. And even though we would rather be in the 4th dimensional middle position where everything is just moderate and that's less dramatic, there are also possible dynamics that goes with the 5th. But the 5th is all about the radiation field, so that's the belief systems, the mental processes, and we are seeing that playing out on our planet right now. And for that, there are specific entities that normally arise when the segregation, the division is supposed to happen, and they're part of the 5th dimension. And as we have avatars on one side, we have avatars on the other side, and all of this, you can say, well, is there going to be, even though I said that we're not going to have any avatars, they are not going to have any avatars either, but there is one that has not entered yet, that has not played out his last cycle, and that one is getting ready to come in. So that means that we as a civilization on the positive timeline, we won't get any teacher, because we are the ones that should know this via our inner knowledge. We are this, as I talked about from the esoterics, the age of Aquarius. Humanity that stands in the light is the new avatar. And that's a collective, that's as a team, not a teacher. That's the 4th cycle, but as individuals, strong individuals that are literally acting as lighthouses in the dark. So that's the polarity that we are entering into. And we must stand energetically, consciously, as transformative beings, knowing exactly how energy works and how consciousness works, and what to look at, what not to look at, what to engage with, what not to engage with, how to create the balance point, all these things that you find in the transition sciences and the clearing work. And that we must stand very strong in our everyday lives. That's the first step. That's the first correct commitment that we are taking on to ourselves, taking the responsibility for our own energy system, our own body, our own local environment, and that means our home and the way we live and the impact we have on the world. That's step 1. That's the first nodal point you are to create. And yes, you can be thrown off, and yes, you can get out of balance and all of these things, but keep getting back into the balance point where you become that transformative force that either evaporates or lifts things up to the higher equivalent. And right now, as I've said for years, the best method is right now just evaporation until further notice, because the further notice is inner earth, whatever that is, because they have not appeared yet. They can't come in the 4th. In the 4th dimension, they have just been inside our reality via the different types of UAPs that have upheld our reality, as I've talked about. That's where their contribution. And again, using technology, the 1-7 pillar has unfortunately also a lot of technology. So they have been using that. That has been their contribution. But as we're moving into the fifth, then they're forced by the polarity forces like the rest of us, and Andromedans are as well. The polarity now comes in. Either you were with or you're against. So there's no longer in between. The Bodhisattva approach does not apply in the fifth. So that means the kindness and the understanding of how to balance energies in the fifth dimension is that we become that kindness. We are that kindness. We emit that kindness. And when we get influenced by what is not kind and what is not that, then we clear it out and transform it as we know in the fourth, and then get back into the center point of that neutral, sovereign stand in our rightful use of the principles and the rules and the laws of energy utilization. Okay, so that's our guideline. That's what keeps us centered in this reality on the original timeline and the path out. So that's the first step that we have to, put our attention to and say that this is what I choose to do. Others can choose other methods. I can only share what I've experienced and what I know and what's part of my journey and the relative realities I come from. So this is my advice from the worlds I come from. Whoever comes from other worlds, you might have other solutions to how you're going to do this. But this path out goes for all that are progressive, and that we're not talking base program here, we're talking the fifth dimension. There are other forces that are playing around with some of the fifth dimensional timelines from Atlantis. They have a different approach to what the fifth dimension is. This is not the one I'm advocating here. I'm not advocating New Earth. But I haven't made that material yet, so therefore it's a little bit diffuse. It's a little bit, what does she actually mean? And that's because the polarity forces have not yet gone into their dark fifth, so I cannot yet express the polarity of it. So that's the rules that I have to follow, where others are not following these rules, and by that they can come up with all sorts of seedings and patterns and whatnot to create their version, following the crystalline Sirian B energies and whatever they seeded in years ago. With that said, I think that's kind of what I wanted to say today, actually. I know it might feel overwhelming that you're waking up and then listening to what Randi Green is saying, but that's kind of the function I have right now. It's not about giving a lot of incentives to do this or that or whatever, and now you pick up the tools and you begin to build and do whatever. If you have that, please do, of course. But I'm a little bit more. I'm old. I'm not running as quickly as I used to. When I mean old of energy and been around for a very, very long time. And for me, it's more prudent just to breathe a little bit, see what they play out, so we know exactly what the polarity is. Because if we go out too strong now with too much light, then due to the polarity forces, they can do the opposite. It's better that they do whatever they're doing, even though it's not nice to watch or be a witness to, but it's still due to the division, the segregation, then it's easier for us to get up to where we need to go, but it's a step ladder process. So I suggest instead we do the balancing point, the middle path to begin with, and then we begin to build as the middle path in the fourth dimension, evaporating or elevating using the transformational forces that I explain in the transition sciences, and then get to the point where we can begin to do the reconfiguration that will then align with the structures of the path ahead. That means either into the future or as an exit. The exit is the first point on that path, and those who get to that point and then by the energies of whatever inner earth will provide will then tell if there is a possibility to continue, and then inner earth will be the foundation of the future civilizations on our planet. But that's all in the making. Nobody has made a decision because it's still unclear how far the polarity forces will go in this cycle. And last time with their timelines, we had the evac. That was the solution back then. But now we open up the doors that perhaps, because they have already played it out, perhaps whoever and whatever will fizzle out more quickly, because the first time you play out a timeline, it is stronger. The second time, the third time, however many repeats you have, it will always become vague and weaker, and in that way not as strong and not as impactful. And we are to, as progressives, no matter what happens on the other side, we must always choose the cleverest path that leads for the highest good of the many. We will always choose the options that leads for the continuation of reality fields. That's our commitment, the continued existence and progression and development of the worlds that we can become part of, where we do our consciousness journeys, because these are the eternal parts that change and transforms. They're not the same because they're made of energy that are impacted by whoever traverse through it, sojourns through these realms. But it is, if they stop to exist, then there will come gaps in the reality fabric itself, and that will impact consciousness ahead. And that's why these realms that are close to the void, they must be sucked into the void by their own doing, by their own choices, where they eventually, because there's no longer any viability as a polarity to them, will then begin to disintegrate. That's the plan for now, but we also know that they have technology, and there are always people that are in the middle point that sometimes sway too far to the left-hand path, and by that become part of it, and it's always renewed in some way or some form due to the fifth dimension. As long as the fifth cycle are not completed within these cycles of consciousness potentials, then there will always be that polarity. So, of course, the overarching goal is to move beyond the fifth dimension and get into the sixth, where everything unites and become unity. And then all of these stupidities will no longer be forced into play. Then the clever student will, of course, ask, well, what about the future? Will the future civilizations go into some of these fifth dimensional polarity forces? No, if our cycles, the lineages that are now here, complete the polarity of the past universal cycles, because that's what we're dealing with here. If we complete that and evaporate, and that's where the evaporation comes in, if we evaporate everything that connects to that, then it cannot rise up again as part of the new universal lineages in the next universal cycles. So that's the true meaning of the highest good of the many. And that's why it's so important that we work to evaporate and annihilate everything that connects to the previous universal cycles. Also releasing whatever is of positive consciousness units, which I've been part of, whatever technology that connects to these, whatever timelines, whatever is there. Everything must collapse and cease to exist and be drawn to the void, so that the future civilizations in whatever cycle and the future lineages in whatever universal cycle no longer has to deal with that universe that we, this group who are in play now, came from. And that's our obligation. Okay, so I think that's going from the base program and to the highest level of governance that I can administer today. So with that said, until next time, take care and be well.